fix the catastrophic system error and get $100.
Fix this and I'll give you $100 million. Richard Thorne's voice sliced through the boardroom like broken glass, his manicured fingers stabbing toward the boy in torn sneakers and faded jeans. Kofi stood frozen beside his father, one hand gripping Kwame's weathered coat, while 200 executives watched in suffocating silence. Thorne's lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. Maybe the streets taught him what my Ivy Leaguers forgot. Harsh laughter erupted across TechCore Global Industries' 20th floor headquarters. Kwame's calloused hands trembled as he tried to pull his son back toward the elevator. 3 million people were watching the live press conference stream, witnessing a billionaire CEO use a beggar's child as entertainment. Behind Thorne, the wall of monitors screamed crimson warnings. His proprietary Sentinel AI had collapsed 17 hours ago. His army of credentialed engineers stood scattered around the room like chess pieces knocked sideways, their $1,000 suits doing nothing to hide their defeat. Kofi's eyes locked onto those blazing screens with laser focus. His fingers moved unconsciously, tracing patterns in the air that no one else could see. Not one of the adults in that room caught the flash of understanding that lit up his face. They were about to pay the most humiliating price imaginable for their arrogance. The catastrophe had begun yesterday morning when TechCore's Sentinel traffic management system started issuing contradictory commands across 5 major metropolitan areas. Highway intersections became parking lots. A 43-car pileup on the interstate had left 6 people dead. Emergency services couldn't navigate their own cities. Thorne's company stock had plummeted 42% in a single trading day, evaporating $8 billion in market value before the opening bell even finished ringing. If you've ever been underestimated because of where you came from, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from right now. This story hits different when you've lived it. The crisis room reeked of desperation and expensive cologne mixed with stale coffee. Dr. Marcus Chen, Thorne's chief architect, had just finished his 4th explanation of why every conventional solution had failed. Network penetration testing showed nothing. Hardware diagnostics came back clean. The AI's machine learning parameters were within acceptable ranges. Even the backup systems refused to engage properly, as if the entire infrastructure was rejecting help. Thorne paced behind his war table like a caged predator, his $2,000 shoes clicking against Italian marble. His board of directors had given him 72 hours to fix this before they called an emergency vote. His competitors were already circling. Hedge funds were shorting his stock into oblivion, and the mayor of Chicago had personally threatened federal intervention. That's when Kwame had somehow talked his way past security, claiming his son could help, carrying nothing but desperate hope and a smartphone held together with electrical tape. Thorne had been 3 seconds from calling security when inspiration struck him with vicious clarity. Why not humiliate them publicly? Turn this disaster into theater. Show the world that even a street kid would fail where Stanford and MIT graduates had already fallen. The cameras were already rolling for the crisis press conference anyway. So here they stood, father and son, Beggar and CEO, the man who owned 18 properties versus the boy who slept in shelters. Thorne felt the familiar rush of power that came from controlling a room, from watching people squirm under the weight of their own inadequacy. He'd built his empire on this feeling, the bone-deep certainty that some people were simply born to rule while others were born to serve. What Thorne didn't know, what none of them could possibly know, was that Kofi had spent 3 years sitting beside broken traffic signals on Roosevelt Avenue, watching the patterns, studying the failures with discarded tablets he'd taught himself to repair. While Thorne's engineers had learned theory in climate-controlled classrooms, Kofi had learned reality in the city's digital nervous system, seeing exactly how systems broke when they contradicted themselves in real time. The boy's eyes hadn't left the error cascade on the main screen. His young mind was already 4 steps ahead, tracing the logic backwards through the failure sequence, finding the invisible wound that was bleeding TechCore dry. Behind the system error alerts and the flashing warnings and the panic status reports, Kofi could see the truth with perfect, crystalline clarity. The engineers had taught the machine to be too smart for its own good. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that felt obscene in the suffocating tension. Kofi's hand tightened around his father's coat as Kwame pushed him forward into the crisis room, past security guards who looked ready to intervene. Richard Thorne turned slowly, his expression shifting from irritation to something far more dangerous. Amusement. Look what desperation dragged in. Thorne's voice carried across the marble floor, silencing every conversation in the room. The CEO straightened his tie, a predator recognizing an opportunity for sport. Kwame's voice cracked as he spoke. My son. He understands these systems, Mr. Thorne. He's been studying them for years. Years? Thorne's laugh was surgical, cutting. Where exactly? Street University? The engineers behind him joined in, their laughter echoing off glass walls. Kofi felt 200 pairs of eyes burning into his second-hand clothes, his worn sneakers, the frayed backpack that held everything he owned. Dr. Marcus Chun stepped forward, his MIT ring catching the light. Sir, we don't have time for this circus. We've been through every diagnostic protocol. Then what's one more failure? Thorne moved closer, circling Kofi like something predatory and patient. He stopped directly in front of the boy, pointing at the wall of crimson error messages. Fix this and I'll give you $100 million. His finger jabbed toward Kofi's chest. But when you fail, and you will fail, I want you and your father banned from this building, from this city, from ever wasting my time again. The room went silent except for the soft hum of failing servers. Kwame's hands trembled on Kofi's shoulders, trying to pull him back, trying to undo this terrible mistake. But Kofi's eyes were locked on those screens, watching data cascade in patterns that somehow made perfect sense to him. Patterns he'd seen 1,000 times on Roosevelt Avenue, in the traffic signals that controlled his daily survival. Behind Thorne, a junior analyst whispered urgently into her phone. The stock price had dropped another 3 points in the last hour. Bloomberg was running a countdown to TechCore's board meeting. 48 hours until the vote of no confidence. The mayor's office had just announced federal transportation authorities were preparing to take over the city's traffic management. This wasn't just a corporate crisis anymore. This was a civilization-level failure. And Thorne wanted to use a child's humiliation as a press conference spectacle. You have 5 minutes. Thorne gestured to the screens with theatrical flourish. Show us what Roosevelt Avenue taught you about billion-dollar AI systems. The cameras positioned around the room zoomed in, capturing Kofi's frightened face, his father's desperate expression. 3 million viewers watched live, the comments section exploding with outrage and mockery in equal measure. But Kofi wasn't looking at the cameras. He was studying the error cascade with intensity that made his young face look ancient. His lips moved silently, counting something invisible. His fingers twitched, tracing connections in the air. Kwame recognized that look. The same expression Kofi wore when he was repairing broken tablets in their shelter, when he was explaining why the traffic lights on 5th and Madison contradicted each other every morning at rush hour. Dr. Chun checked his watch. For minutes. The boy hasn't even moved. Thorne's smile widened. He leaned down until his face was level with Kofi's. What's wrong, street genius? Realize you're out of your depth? His voice dropped to a whisper that the microphones barely caught. You're nothing. Your father's nothing. And in 4 minutes, the entire world is going to watch me prove it. Kofi's hand slowly rose, one finger pointing at a specific section of code scrolling across the leftmost monitor. His voice came out steady, clear, cutting through every conversation in the room like a blade through silk. You're checking the wrong thing. Every engineer in the room froze. Thorne's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. And in that fraction, Kofi saw something that made his heart race with possibility. The CEO didn't actually know what was wrong with his own system. What did you just say? The silence in the room felt like pressure against Kofi's eardrums. Dr. Chun moved forward, his face flushed with barely controlled anger. The boy doesn't know what he's talking about. We've run diagnostics on every system component. Hardware integrity is at 99%. Network security shows no breaches. The AI's learning parameters are all within acceptable variance. That's the problem. Kofi's voice came out stronger now, his finger still pointing at the cascading data. You're looking at all the parts separately, but they're talking to each other wrong. Kwame's grip on his son's shoulder tightened in warning. These people weren't here to listen. They were here to watch them fail, to justify their contempt. But Kofi couldn't stop himself now, couldn't unsee what was blazing across those screens in perfect, terrible clarity. Thorn crossed his arms, his amusement returning like a mask sliding back into place. Talking to each other wrong. He repeated the phrase slowly, savoring each word. Ladies and gentlemen, we've spent $300 million on communication protocols alone. But this child thinks our systems have a what? A speech impediment? The laughter was crueler this time, sharper. A woman in the back actually applauded. Kofi felt heat rising in his face but kept his eyes locked on the monitors. On Roosevelt Avenue, he'd watched the traffic signals fail in exactly this pattern every morning. The northbound light would turn green at the exact moment the algorithm predicted low traffic, but the prediction was based on the previous cycle's data, which was itself based on a prediction, which created a feedback loop that made every prediction progressively wronger until the entire intersection locked up. Show me the core algorithm. Kofi's request came out like a command, surprising everyone including himself. Dr. Chun laughed outright. That's proprietary code. You think we're going to show classified corporate assets to show him? Thorn's voice cut through the objection like ice. I want to watch this play out. I want the cameras to catch the exact moment he realizes he's drowning. A technician hesitated, then pulled up the algorithm's logic tree on the central screen. Thousands of lines of code, nested conditionals, quantum probability matrices, machine learning feedback loops layered on top of predictive modeling systems. It was a masterpiece of complexity, a digital cathedral built by the finest minds money could buy. Kofi stared at it for exactly 7 seconds. There. His finger traced a path through the logic that made Dr. Chun lean forward despite himself. You told the system to verify its own decisions by checking its previous state. But you also told it to trust that the previous state was correct. So it's checking a fact against itself. Like asking a liar if they're lying. The room went still. Kofi continued, his street-taught logic cutting through years of academic theory. Every time it makes a decision, it checks if that decision matches what it decided before. And if it doesn't match, it assumes the new decision is wrong. So it changes the new decision to match the old one. Over and over. The system isn't failing. It's strangling itself with its own certainty. One of the junior engineers, a woman named Sarah with a Harvard degree, pulled up a diagnostic subroutine. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her face going progressively paler. She looked up at Dr. Chun, then at Thorn, her voice barely above a whisper. He's right. The redundant verification loop creates a feedback cycle every time external conditions change faster than the prediction model updates. The system interprets contradictory data as system error rather than environmental change. Impossible. Dr. Chen's voice had lost its confidence. We would have caught that in testing. You tested it in controlled environments. Kofi turned to face him directly, this street kid looking up at the MIT graduate with something like pity. But cities aren't controlled. They're chaos. Your system works perfect in a lab. But reality keeps changing faster than your AI can trust itself to adapt. Thorn's face had gone carefully neutral, his showman's mask slipping. The cameras were still rolling. The comments section was exploding. Someone had already clipped Kofi's explanation, and it was racing across social media with terrifying speed. Kwame finally found his voice. We should go. We shouldn't be here. But his hand loosened on Kofi's shoulder, because even he could see it now. The terrible, beautiful truth that his son had somehow learned from watching broken systems in real time while these brilliant engineers had learned theory from books. Fine. Thorne's voice came out tight, controlled. Fix it. The challenge hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Every engineer in the room knew what Thorne was doing, setting the boy up for a second, more public failure. Because identifying a problem was easy, actually fixing it without destroying the entire system in the process. That required years of training, understanding, expertise that no amount of street observation could replace. Dr. Chun gestured to a workstation with theatrical courtesy. Be my guest. Let's see you code a solution with your... What education level did you reach? 8th grade? 7th. Kofi moved to the terminal, his hands hovering over the keyboard. He taught himself to type on discarded laptops, hunting and pecking until muscle memory took over. The interface looked different from the ancient machines he'd learned on, but the logic underneath was the same. Always the same. Input, process, output. Cause and effect. Kwame stood behind him, paralyzed between pride and terror. If Kofi failed now, after that explanation, the humiliation would be complete, permanent, viral. But if he somehow succeeded, the boy pulled up the algorithm's core structure, ignoring the complex quantum matrices and machine learning layers. Those weren't the problem. The problem was simpler, more fundamental. Hidden beneath all that impressive complexity was a basic logical error that any undergraduate should have caught. But these weren't undergraduates. These were experts. And experts, Kofi had learned, sometimes became so intelligent they outsmarted themselves. You need to remove the self-verification check. Kofi's fingers moved across the keyboard, isolating the redundant loop. His voice stayed calm, educational, like he was explaining something obvious to a friend. Right now, the AI checks its new decision against its old decision. If they don't match, it assumes the new decision is wrong. You need to reverse that. Make it check the old decision against current reality. If they don't match, update the old decision. That will create system instability. Dr. Chun moved closer, watching the code changes with growing alarm. The AI needs decision consistency or it will oscillate between contradictory states. In a stable environment, yes. Kofi kept typing, his explanation flowing with practiced ease. But cities aren't stable. Traffic changes. Accidents happen. Weather shifts. Your AI needs to be wrong sometimes. It needs to doubt itself. That's not instability. That's adaptation. Sarah, the Harvard engineer, pulled up a simulation environment. Her voice carried a note of something new, respect. If we implement this change, we need to test the cascade effects across all linked systems. Traffic management connects to emergency services, public transportation, utility load balancing. Then we test it. Kofi looked up at Thorne. Unless you want to wait for your board meeting in 43 hours. The CEO's jaw worked silently. Around the room, engineers were already modeling the proposed change, running it through theoretical scenarios. The math was elegant, disturbingly elegant. A single modification that would propagate through the entire Sentinel AI architecture, teaching it to question its own certainty instead of protecting it. Implement it. Thorne's voice came out hoarse. But if this crashes the entire system, if this makes things worse, it won't. Kofi stepped back from the terminal. Because I've watched this exact failure happen every single morning for 3 years. And I've watched how the system eventually corrects itself. Too late, after people are already stuck, already angry. All I'm doing is teaching it to correct faster. Dr. Chen's hands trembled slightly as he reviewed the code modification. It was 17 lines. 17 lines to fix a problem that had cost them $3 billion. His voice came out hollow, defeated. Compile and deploy to the test partition. If the simulation runs clean, we'll push it to live systems. The room held its breath as code compiled, as testing protocols ran through thousands of scenario models. Traffic patterns from rush hour, accident responses, weather events, system updates. every variation that the Sentinel AI might encounter in real-world deployment. The simulation results populated across the screens in cascading green. 97% efficiency improvement. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. 0 critical errors. Adaptive response time improved by... She stopped, checking the numbers twice. By 340%. That's impossible. Dr. Chun stared at the data like it was personally attacking him. Kofi turned to face Thorne directly. Want to know what's really impossible? That none of you saw this. That you built complexity on top of a broken foundation and just kept building higher. Like constructing a skyscraper on sand and wondering why it keeps sinking. The silence that followed felt different from before. Heavier. More dangerous. Because every engineer in that room understood what the boy wasn't saying out loud. That their impressive degrees, their prestigious institutions, their elite training had somehow made them worse at solving problems. That they'd learned to look for complicated answers because complicated answers proved how smart they were. Deploy it. Thorne's command came out flat. Empty. Push the fix to live systems. If you're watching this and you've ever been overlooked because you didn't have the right credentials, because you didn't come from the right background, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, because this is your story too. The deployment sequence initiated. Across 5 major metropolitan areas, the Sentinel AI began updating its core logic. Traffic signals that had been frozen in contradictory states started adapting. Highway on-ramps that had been creating bottlenecks began flowing. Emergency vehicles that had been trapped in gridlock found sudden clear paths. On the monitors, error messages began clearing one by one. Red warnings shifted to yellow cautions, then to green confirmations. The system was learning, adapting, doubting its own certainty just enough to see reality clearly. But nobody was watching the successful deployment. Every eye in the room was locked on Richard Thorne's face as it cycled through emotions too complex for any algorithm to process. Shock, rage, humiliation, and underneath it all, the terrible recognition that a child in torn sneakers had just exposed the rotting foundation of his entire empire. What else is broken? The question hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Kofi stood motionless at the terminal, understanding flooding through him with cold clarity. This wasn't victory. This was an invitation to a much more dangerous game. Thorne moved to the window overlooking the city, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. Traffic far below was already beginning to flow, brake lights streaming through intersections that had been paralyzed for 17 hours. His voice came out controlled, measured, the tone of a man forcing himself to sound rational. You fixed one system. Congratulations. But TechCore Global Industries runs infrastructure across 47 cities, 12 countries, processing 8 trillion data points daily. You think your street wisdom applies to everything we've built? Dr. Chun seized the opportunity, his confidence rebuilding. The Sentinel AI is traffic management. Elementary compared to our utility grid optimization, our resource allocation networks, our financial systems. Your financial systems? Kofi's question came out too sharp. He saw his father flinch, saw Kwame's warning look. But the words were already out there, and something in Dr. Chen's expression told him he'd hit a nerve. The engineer's face flushed. Those systems are quantum encrypted, protected by security protocols that make the Pentagon look accessible. They're audited by regulatory agencies monthly. Whatever simplistic problem you found in our traffic AI, I guarantee the financial infrastructure is built by the same people. Kofi turned back to the screens where his fix was still propagating, still clearing error after error. Using the same logic, the same assumption that complexity equals security. That checking yourself against yourself somehow counts as verification. Enough. Thorne spun from the window, and his mask of control had cracks showing through. His stock price had rallied 7 points in the last 12 minutes. Bloomberg was already running breaking news about the Sentinel AI recovery. But that only made what came next more vicious. You want to know what else is broken? Fine. You have 24 hours. The room erupted in objections. Sir, we can't give a child access to core infrastructure. Mr. Thorne, the liability alone. This is insane. 24 hours. Thorne's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. You find and fix every system with this redundant loop problem. Every single one. You document it, you prove it, you fix it. And if you succeed, he paused, letting the cameras capture his face. Then you get your $100 million. Kwame finally found his voice, stepping forward. Mr. Thorne, my son is 14 years old. He hasn't slept. He hasn't eaten. You can't, but I can. Thorne's smile returned, colder now, more calculated. Because here's the other side of that deal. If he fails, if he misses even one critical system, if he causes any damage whatsoever to tech core infrastructure, he pointed at both of them, you're both banned. Not just from this building. I will personally ensure you're barred from every shelter, every assistance program, every street corner in this city. I will make you ghosts. The threat landed like a physical blow. Kwame went pale. Around the room, engineers shifted uncomfortably, some looking away. This had crossed a line from corporate theater to something uglier. But the cameras were still rolling. Thorne had backed himself into a corner, and the only way out was through complete destruction of the people who'd exposed him. Sarah spoke up quietly. This is unnecessary. The boy identified a critical flaw. We should be grateful. Grateful? Thorne rounded on her. A beggar's dropout son just humiliated every engineer in this room on live television. #BeggarGenius is trending #1 worldwide. Our competitors are having a field day. Our board members are calling for my head. So no, Sarah, I'm not grateful. I'm giving this street rat exactly what he asked for. A chance to prove his wisdom goes beyond lucky guesses. Kofi met his father's terrified eyes, saw the unspoken plea to walk away, to take the small victory and leave before Thorne crushed them completely. But Kofi also saw something else in his father's face. A question. Terrible, wonderful question. What if you really can do this? I'll need access. Kofi's voice came out steadier than he felt. Full system access. No restrictions. Dr. Chun laughed bitterly. You want root access to billions of dollars of infrastructure? Based on fixing one algorithm? Based on understanding what you don't? Kofi turned to face the chief engineer directly. You think in code. I think in systems. You see trees. I see the forest. And your forest is dying from the same disease in 1,000 different places. Thorne gestured sharply. Give him access. Limited monitoring permissions. He can observe but not modify without approval. He pointed at Kofi. 24 hours starting now. Every redundant loop. Every self-referential verification error. You find them all or you lose everything. The timestamp appeared on the main screen. 23:59:47. 23:59:46. Counting down toward either redemption or destruction. Kwame's voice broke. Kofi, please. We can just go. No. Kofi moved back to the terminal, his small hands pulling up system architecture maps. We can't. Because they'll do this to someone else. Someone who doesn't understand what I understand. And that person will fail, and Thorne will use it to prove that people like us should stay in our place. He looked up at his father. I'm not doing this for the money anymore, Papa. I'm doing this so they can't pretend ignorance is the same as wisdom. Sarah moved to a nearby workstation. I'll help. Before anyone could object, she continued. If he's right about systemic design flaws, we need to document this properly. For the board, for the regulators, for whoever picks up the pieces after I'm gone. Thorne finished her sentence coldly. That's what you were going to say, wasn't it? He straightened his tie, his control reforming like ice over water. Fine. Help him. Document everything. Because when he fails, and he will fail, I want proof that we gave him every possible advantage. The CEO walked toward the exit, then paused at the doorway. His voice carried back across the silent room. 23 hours, 57 minutes. Don't waste them. The door closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid. Kofi pulled up the utility grid optimization system first, watching data flow through power distribution networks across the eastern seaboard. His eyes tracked patterns, finding the familiar signature almost immediately. There. And he highlighted 17 separate instances in the first 30 seconds, everywhere. Sarah watched over his shoulder, her face going progressively paler. She pulled up the financial trading system logs, running a quick diagnostic. Her hand covered her mouth. Oh God, it's in everything. Kwame stood behind his son, one hand on Kofi's shoulder, feeling the boy's body vibrating with exhaustion and determination. Outside the windows, the sun was beginning to set, painting the city in blood-red light. Somewhere in this building, Richard Thorne was already planning how to spin the boy's inevitable failure, how to turn this disaster into a triumph of institutional superiority. But what neither of them knew yet, what even Kofi hadn't fully realized, was that the deeper he dug into TechCore systems, the more he would find that redundant verification loops weren't just design flaws. They were camouflage. Hour 3 of the marathon, and Kofi had already identified 47 instances of the redundant feedback loop pattern. Dr. Chun hovered behind him like a storm cloud, checking each finding, running independent verification, his expression growing more haggard with every confirmation. The boy was right about all of it. Sarah had set up a documentation system, recording each discovery with timestamps and system impact assessments. The utility grid optimization system, the municipal water distribution AI, the autonomous warehouse logistics network, the public transportation coordination platform. Every major system in TechCore's portfolio carried the same fundamental flaw, teaching machines to trust their own certainty more than observable reality. But something else was emerging in the data, something that made Sarah's fingers pause over her keyboard. Kofi, look at this. She pulled up access logs for the financial systems, specifically the quantum-secured financial trading engine, the one Dr. Chun had mentioned earlier with such pride. The performance metrics are odd. Odd how? Kofi moved to her screen, his eyes scanning the information. His exhaustion was starting to show, dark circles forming under his eyes, his movements slower. But his mind was still racing ahead, connecting dots that others couldn't see. The system is running at 35% efficiency, but the reported efficiency to regulators is 92%. Sarah highlighted the discrepancy. Someone's been falsifying the performance data. Before Kofi could respond, the door slammed open. Richard Thorne strode in, flanked by 2 board members and a phalanx of lawyers. His face was composed, but his eyes betrayed something dangerous. How's our street genius doing? Dr. Chun straightened, his professional mask sliding into place. He's found the redundant verification pattern across 47 systems. All confirmed. All requiring the same basic fix. 47. Thorne let the number sit in the air. In 6 hours. He moved closer to Kofi, studying him like a specimen. You know what I think? I think you got lucky with Sentinel. Found one problem and now you're seeing it everywhere because that's all you know how to find. Kofi met his gaze. You think I'm wrong about the other systems? I think Thorne's voice dropped to something intimate, cruel. That you're exhausted, overwhelmed, out of your depth. And I think in about 16 hours you're going to realize that finding problems is easy. Fixing them without breaking everything else? That requires expertise you'll never have. One of the board members, an older woman named Patricia Stern, spoke up quietly. Richard, the boy has identified critical flaws. We should be working with him, not undermining my authority. Thorne turned on her. Not showing weakness to our competitors. Not admitting that a dropout child found what our 300-person engineering division missed. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Patricia, if we validate his findings, If we admit he's right about everything, our stock will crater. Our contracts will be reviewed. Our reputation will be destroyed. The truth landed in the room like a grenade. This wasn't about fixing the systems anymore. This was about protecting the lie that had built the empire. About maintaining the facade that credentials and pedigree were the same as competence. Kofi's voice came out flat, tired. So you want me to fail? I want you to understand your place. Thorne crouched down to Kofi's level, his face inches away. You're not special. You're not gifted. You got lucky once. And tomorrow morning, when you stand in front of those cameras and admit you couldn't finish what you started, the world will go back to making sense. The qualified will lead. The unqualified will follow. Kwame moved forward, but Kofi held up a hand to stop him. His eyes never left Thorne's. What if I prove you wrong? The CEO's smile returned, sharp and certain. Then I'll give you more than $100 million. Fix everything, every system, and I'll add the quantum-secured financial trading engine to your list. His voice rose, addressing the entire room. If this boy can fix our most complex, most secure, most critical financial infrastructure in the time remaining, he paused for effect, I'll make him chief technical consultant. Full salary, full benefits, full authority over all tech core systems. The lawyers erupted in objections. Sir, that's not possible, the liability, the regulations. Done. Kofi extended his hand. But when I succeed, because I will succeed, you don't just give me the money and the job. You admit it, publicly, that credentials meant nothing, that your entire methodology was broken, that a beggar's son was right and you were wrong. The hand hung in the air between them. Everyone in the room understood what was really being offered. Not just a job, not just money, a complete inversion of the social order that had made men like Thorne rich and boys like Kofi invisible. Thorne took the hand. His grip was crushing, meant to intimidate. Deal. But understand something. When you fail, I will make sure everyone knows it wasn't because you lacked opportunity. It was because you lacked ability. No excuses. No second chances. They shook. Sarah captured the moment on video. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Chun looked like he wanted to object but couldn't find the words. Kofi turned back to his terminal. 15 hours, 42 minutes left. He pulled up the quantum-secured financial trading engine architecture, and his eyes went wide. The system was a cathedral of complexity, layers of encryption and security protocols wrapped around high-frequency trading algorithms that process billions of transactions per second. It was designed to be impenetrable, unhackable, untouchable. And it was running at 35% efficiency while reporting 92%. Someone's stealing. Kofi's words fell into the silence like stones into water. Someone built a backdoor into the system, and the redundant verification loops are hiding it. Impossible. Dr. Chun moved to look at the data. That system is audited monthly by people who trust the performance reports. Kofi highlighted the discrepancy Sarah had found. But the reports are lies. The system is slow on purpose. Just slow enough to create tiny execution delays in the trading window. Delays that someone could exploit if they knew exactly when and where to look. Thorne's face had gone carefully blank. You're saying someone in my company is committing financial fraud. I'm saying your broken system is the perfect cover for it. Kofi zoomed into the execution logs, showing patterns of delayed trades that consistently benefited specific accounts. Small delays, microseconds. But microseconds in high-frequency trading could mean millions of dollars. And it's been happening for at least 8 months. Sarah ran a quick trace on the beneficiary accounts. They're routed through shell corporations. She looked up at the board members. Someone with access to the core trading engine has been systematically front-running our clients' trades, using the system's poor performance as camouflage. The room erupted. Accusations flew. Lawyers scrambled to contain the information. Patricia Stern demanded an immediate internal investigation. But through the chaos, Kofi kept working, his fingers flying across the keyboard, tracing the fraud back through layers of obfuscation. Because he understood now. The redundant verification loops weren't just design flaws. They were intentional. Someone had coded them in deliberately to create the performance drag that enabled the theft. And fixing them wouldn't just improve efficiency. It would expose the crime. Thorne grabbed Kofi's shoulder, spinning him around. His mask had completely shattered. Stop. Right now. You don't touch that system. You don't fix anything. You don't want me to show everyone what you built. Kofi pulled away. What your company really is. The CEO's voice dropped to a whisper. You have no idea what you're dealing with. The forces you're about to unleash. Some things are broken for a reason. Then they deserve to stay broken? Kofi met his eyes. People's pensions are in those trading accounts. Retirement funds. College savings. And someone's been stealing from them for months while you all patted yourselves on the back for how secure your systems were. 14 hours remained on the countdown. Kofi turned back to the terminal, to the quantum cathedral of code that hid theft behind the illusion of complexity. His hands hovered over the keyboard. I'm fixing it. All of it. And whoever built the backdoor, he looked at Thorne, at Dr. Chun, at the board members who'd gone very quiet. They're going to have to explain why they needed it. The silence that followed felt like the moment before a dam breaks. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Kofi kept drinking it anyway. His eyes burned. His fingers cramped. The terminal in front of him had become his entire universe. Lines of code scrolling past in patterns that he could almost taste. Around him, the crisis room had transformed into a war zone of whispered conversations and frantic phone calls. Sarah sat nearby, documenting each discovery, her face reflecting the horror of what they were uncovering. The redundant feedback loops weren't just in 47 systems. They were everywhere. In the municipal emergency response network. In the power grid load balancing. In the autonomous vehicle coordination system. In the hospital resource allocation AI. Every major infrastructure system TechCore had built was strangling itself with its own certainty. But the financial trading engine was different. Worse, Kofi had spent 3 hours tracing the execution delays, mapping the pattern of microsecond lags that created the exploitation window. The backdoor was elegant, hidden in what appeared to be a legitimate security verification step. Every trade passed through a quantum encryption validator that added a tiny variable delay, supposedly for security. But the delay pattern wasn't random. It was predictable if you had the right key. And someone had the key. Dr. Chun had retreated to a corner, running independent verification on a laptop, his entire worldview crumbling around him. He'd helped design some of these systems, had championed them to clients, had defended their complexity as necessary sophistication. Now a 14-year-old dropout was systematically proving that complexity had been camouflage for incompetence and theft. Hour 9. Thorne returned with his lawyers, his face haggard. The board has called an emergency session. They want a preliminary report on your findings. Kofi didn't look up from his screen. Tell them their company has been committing systematic fraud against its clients for at least 8 months. Maybe longer. And the fraud is built into the architecture of every system they run. You can't prove that. One of the lawyers stepped forward, his voice sharp with panic. You're making serious accusations. I can prove all of it. Kofi finally turned around. Every system has the same pattern. Unnecessary complexity hiding basic logical flaws. But the financial system is special. The complexity there isn't just incompetence. It's deliberate. Someone coded the redundant loops to create performance drag. Then someone else, maybe the same person, exploited that drag to steal. Patricia Stern had joined them, her phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call and spoke quietly. The SEC just contacted us. They've been monitoring unusual trading patterns in our client accounts for the last 3 months. If what you're saying is true, she looked at Thorne. We're not just facing a technical crisis. We're facing criminal investigation. Thorne's control finally shattered completely. He grabbed a chair, hurled it against the glass wall. The sound made everyone jump. 7 years. 7 years building this company, making it matter. And you, he pointed at Kofi with shaking hand. You're gonna destroy it in one night. I'm not destroying anything. Kofi's voice stayed level, but exhaustion made it crack at the edges. I'm just showing what was already there. The destruction happened when someone decided profits mattered more than truth. The CEO laughed, but it sounded broken. Truth? You want to talk about truth? The truth is that the world runs on confidence, on trust, on the belief that qualified people in positions of authority know what they're doing. You're not exposing corruption. You're destroying the foundation that society is built on. Maybe that foundation deserved to crumble. Sarah spoke up quietly. If it was built on lies. Thorne turned on her. You're fired. No. Patricia Stern's voice cut through the room. She's not. And neither is anyone else until we understand the full scope of this situation. She moved to stand beside Kofi. How long until you can fix the financial system? Kofi pulled up the quantum trading engine architecture again, his eyes scanning the layers of encryption and security. The fix is simple, same as the Sentinel AI. Remove the redundant verification loop. Let the system check itself against reality instead of against its own assumptions. But what? But the moment I fix it, the system will speed up. A lot. And when it speeds up, the exploitation window disappears. Whoever's been using the backdoor will know immediately that they've been caught. Perfect for them. Patricia's voice hardened. Let them know. Let them panic. Maybe they'll make a mistake. Kofi shook his head slowly. You don't understand. If they're smart, they've already built in a failsafe. Something that triggers if the system performance suddenly improves. They might try to crash the entire trading network to cover their tracks. The room went silent. Dr. Chun looked up from his laptop, his face pale. If the QSFT crashes completely during trading hours, it would lock billions in active transactions. The cascading failure could trigger market-wide circuit breakers. We're talking potential financial contagion. So we're trapped. Thorne's voice came out hollow. We can't fix it without exposing the theft. We can't expose the theft without risking a market crash. And we can't leave it broken because the SEC is already watching. Kofi's fingers drummed against the desk, his mind racing through possibilities. Unless he pulled up the system's monitoring logs. Unless we make them think the fix failed. Sarah leaned forward. What do you mean? We implement the fix, but we mask the performance improvement. Make the system report the same slow execution times to the monitoring layer while actually running at full speed underneath. Kofi's hands flew across the keyboard, sketching out the solution. Whoever built the backdoor will see the same slow performance data they're used to. They won't know they've lost their exploitation window until we're ready to reveal it. That's... Dr. Chun moved closer, studying the proposed solution. Actually brilliant. We create a honeypot. Let them keep trying to exploit the delay that no longer exists. Every attempted theft becomes documented evidence. But it means waiting. Patricia looked at the countdown clock. You have 5 hours left in your deadline. If you implement this fix, Thorne won't be able to verify the performance improvement publicly. It will look like you failed. Kofi met her eyes. I know. The weight of that hung in the air. Everything Kofi had fought for, the money, the job, the public vindication, would disappear if he chose the path that protected the markets and caught the criminals. He'd have fixed everything, saved millions of people from financial loss, but no one would ever know. Thorne would win the public narrative. The beggar's son would be dismissed as a lucky guesser who couldn't finish the job. Kwame finally spoke, his voice rough from hours of silence. Son, you don't have to sacrifice yourself for these people. They wouldn't do the same for you. I'm not doing it for them. Kofi looked at his father. I'm doing it for everyone who trusted TechCore with their money. For everyone who believed the system was honest. They deserve better than being collateral damage in a public relations war. Thorne stared at him, something incomprehensible flickering across his face. You're actually serious. You'd give up the $100 million. The job. The proof you were right. Just to do this quietly? It's not quiet if it works. Kofi turned back to his screen. It's just not loud. Patricia pulled out her phone. I'm calling the SEC. If we're setting a trap, we need federal agents ready to move the moment we have evidence. Wait, Dr. Chen's voice stopped her. If the SEC gets involved now, whoever's behind this will know something's wrong. They'll run or destroy evidence. He looked at Kofi. How long do you need after implementing the fix to gather proof? 48 hours. Maybe 72. Kofi highlighted the trading patterns. They exploit the delay every morning between 9:32 and 9:47 a.m., when the market volatility is highest. If we can catch 3 consecutive days of attempted exploitation that fails, that shows intent and pattern. 3 days of pretending the system is still broken. Patricia nodded slowly. 3 days of letting Thorne publicly claim you failed. Can you live with that? Before Kofi could answer, alarms erupted across the monitoring systems. Sarah's screen flashed red warnings. Someone's accessing the quantum trading engine remotely. Right now. Trace it. Thorne moved to look over her shoulder. Find out who is coming from inside the building. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard. Executive-level access credentials. The login belongs to... She stopped, her face going white. To you, Mr. Thorne. Impossible. I'm standing right here. Someone cloned your credentials. Dr. Chun was already running a security audit. They've had access to your executive account for... He scrolled through the logs. At least 14 months. The implications cascaded through the room like dominoes falling. Whoever built the backdoor hadn't just exploited the system. They'd framed the CEO as the thief. Every fraudulent trade could be traced back to Thorne's stolen credentials. He was the perfect scapegoat. They're trying to transfer something. Sarah watched data moving through the system in real time. Large file packages. Encrypted. Going to an external server before we can block it. Kofi pulled up a command terminal. Route all outgoing traffic through a monitoring proxy. Don't stop the transfer, just copy everything they're sending. Dr. Chun implemented the command. Done. Whatever they're stealing, we have a duplicate. The transfer completed. The remote access disconnected. The room fell back into tense silence. Sarah examined the captured data, her eyes widening. It's everything. All the trading records that show the exploitation pattern. All the evidence. They were wiping the servers. They know. Patricia's voice was grim. Someone inside this building knows you're close to fixing the system. They're destroying evidence and running. Kofi looked at the countdown clock. For hours, 17 minutes remaining. His exhaustion had reached the point where the world felt slightly unreal, like he was operating in a dream. We implement the fix now. Full speed. No masking. But the honeypot, Sarah started to object. Won't work if they've already destroyed the evidence. Kofi pulled up the quantum trading engine code. We caught the data transfer. We have proof they were trying to hide something. That's enough for the SEC to get warrants, subpoena records, freeze assets. He looked at Patricia. Right? If we move fast. She was already dialing. But it means you need to fix that system perfectly. Right now. No mistakes. Thorne stepped forward, and his voice had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something raw. Real. If you do this, if you expose whoever framed me, I'll honor our deal. The $100 million, the job, the public acknowledgement, all of it. Kofi's hands positioned over the keyboard. I don't want the job. What? I want something better. Kofi met the CEO's eyes. I want you to create a program. Full scholarships. Full support. For kids like me. Kids who understand systems but can't afford the schools that teach you to overcomplicate them. Kids who see patterns that your credentialed engineers miss. Thorne stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Done. Kofi began typing. The fix flowed from his fingers like water, each line of code precise and purposeful. Remove the redundant verification loop. Implement direct reality checking against market conditions. Strip away the unnecessary encryption layers that created the exploitation window. Clean, simple, elegant. Sarah monitored the deployment, her voice providing steady updates. Code compiling, passing security validation, pushing to testing environment. All checks green. Ready for live deployment. Kofi's finger hovered over the execute command. Once he pressed it, there was no going back. The system would accelerate to full efficiency. The backdoor would close. Whoever was behind the theft would know immediately that their scheme had collapsed. Kwame's hand settled on his son's shoulder. I'm proud of you, no matter what happens next. Kofi pressed the button. The quantum-secured financial trading engine shuddered once in the data stream, like a patient taking its first breath after surgery. Then it exploded into full operational speed. Execution times dropped from microseconds to nanoseconds. The trading window that had been exploitable vanished in a blur of optimized code. Performance jumped from 35% to 94% in 17 seconds. Alarms erupted across TechCore's security systems. Someone was trying to access the trading engine from a dozen different terminals simultaneously, trying to open the backdoor that no longer existed. Each failed attempt was logged, time-stamped, documented. Got them. Sarah's voice was triumphant. Whoever it is, they're panicking, making mistakes. The access attempts are coming from... She pulled up the physical locations. The 7th floor. Financial Operations Division. Patricia was already moving toward the door, phone pressed to her ear. Federal agents are 3 minutes out. She pointed at Dr. Chen. Lock down that floor. No one in or out. The crisis room erupted into controlled chaos. Engineers scrambling to secure evidence. Lawyers preparing documentation. Security sealing exits. But Kofi just sat at his terminal, watching the quantum trading engine run at speeds its designers had never believed possible. Because it turned out that when you let a system check itself against reality instead of against its own assumptions, when you stripped away complexity that served ego instead of function, when you trusted adaptation over certainty, everything worked the way it was supposed to. The countdown clock hit 0. 24 hours had passed since Thorne issued his challenge. Kofi had found and fixed not 47 systems, but 63. Had exposed not just design flaws but systematic fraud. Had solved not just a technical crisis but a moral one. But he'd also done something else. Something that would echo far beyond this room. He'd proven that credentials and competence weren't the same thing. That genius could come from places society had learned to ignore. That sometimes the clearest solutions came from minds uncorrupted by the assumption that complexity was sophistication. Thorne stood at the window, watching federal vehicles pull up to the building's entrance. His voice came out quiet, defeated. They're going to arrest someone in my company. On my watch. For crimes I should have caught. You were looking at the wrong things. Kofi moved to stand beside him. You were checking your systems against themselves. Trusting that if all your qualified people agreed, you must be right. But you never checked against reality. The CEO turned to look at him. This boy who'd destroyed and saved his empire in the same night. How did you learn this? From watching things break. Kofi's voice carried the weight of 3 years sitting beside failed traffic signals, repairing discarded electronics, observing systems collapse under the weight of their own assumptions. From understanding that when something's broken, the answer isn't usually more complexity. It's less. Below them, federal agents were entering the building. In the Financial Operations Division, someone was about to learn that stolen credentials only worked if the system they accessed was still vulnerable. That the exploitation window they'd relied on had closed forever. And on social media, the hashtag had evolved. No longer just hashtag Beggar genius. Now it was hashtag systems clearance. People were sharing stories of times when simple solutions had been overlooked in favor of impressive complexity. When practical knowledge had been dismissed in favor of theoretical credentials. The story was going viral for the second time in 24 hours. But this time, it wasn't ending with just a fixed traffic system. This time, someone was going to prison. The 7th floor of TechCore Global Industries had the sterile elegance of a place where billions moved with keystrokes. Federal agents in tactical gear swept through cubicles like a dark tide, badges flashing, warrants reading. Patricia Stern stood in the center of the chaos, directing them toward specific terminals, specific offices. The data Kofi had intercepted during the attempted evidence destruction had given them names. 3 of them. Back in the crisis room, Kofi watched on security monitors as agents converged on the office of Marcus Reeves, Senior Vice President of Financial Operations. The same man who'd designed the quantum encryption protocols. The same man who'd championed the complex verification systems that created the exploitation window. The same man who'd called Kofi a street rat 6 hours ago. Dr. Chun stood beside the monitors, his face ashen. Marcus reported directly to me. I approved every design decision he made. I defended his architecture to the board. You trusted him. Sarah's voice was gentle. That's not the same as being complicit. But I should have seen it. The chief engineer's hands trembled. A 14-year-old saw it in hours. What does that say about me? It says you were taught to look for complex answers. Kofi's voice cut through the self-recrimination. Reeves knew that. He hid his theft behind the kind of sophisticated encryption that people like you would respect. That you'd defend because questioning it would mean admitting you didn't fully understand it. The monitors showed Reeves being escorted from his office in handcuffs. His face was composed, but his eyes darted frantically, looking for exits that no longer existed. Behind him, forensic accountants were already imaging his computers, pulling years of trading records that the quantum system had faithfully logged even while its performance was crippled. Patricia returned to the crisis room, her phone still pressed to her ear. She ended the call and addressed the room. The SEC has frozen all accounts connected to the shell corporations. They're estimating approximately $430 million in fraudulent gains over 18 months. Thorne, who'd been sitting silent in the corner, finally spoke. How much of that was stolen from our clients? All of it. Patricia's voice was clinical, detached. Every dollar. He was front-running their trades, using the system delays to buy fractional seconds before their orders executed. Small amounts from each transaction. But millions of transactions. Death by 1,000 cuts. Kofi pulled up a visualization of the theft pattern, showing how Reeves had distributed the exploitation across thousands of client accounts. No single victim lost enough to notice, but together he highlighted the cumulative total. It's the largest systematic theft in TechCore's history, and it was hidden by our own incompetence. Thorne stood, moving to study the visualization. The redundant verification loops we built into every system. The overcomplicated security protocols. The assumption that complexity meant security. He looked at Kofi. You saw through all of it. Because I wasn't trained not to. Kofi's exhaustion was starting to show in his voice. His words slightly slurred. I wasn't taught that complex solutions were more impressive than simple ones. I just looked at what the system was actually doing versus what it should be doing. The door burst open. 2 more agents escorted in a woman Kofi recognized from the engineering team, Diane Foster, one of Reeves' direct reports. She was crying, mascara streaming down her face. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what he was using the delays for. I just coded what he asked me to code. But you knew the delays were intentional. Patricia's voice was hard. You knew you were crippling system performance deliberately. He said it was for security. Diane's voice cracked. He said the delays were necessary for the quantum encryption to validate properly. I thought. She looked around the room desperately. I thought I was making the system more secure, not creating a backdoor. Sarah pulled up Diane's contributions to the codebase. She coded the verification loops in 17 different systems. But there's no evidence she knew about the exploitation. Her access logs show she never touched the trading execution layer where Reeves built the actual theft mechanism. She's a tool, not a conspirator. Kofi studied Diane's face, seeing the genuine horror there. Reeves used her the same way he used the system, put complexity between her and the truth. The lead federal agent, a woman named Rodriguez, consulted her tablet. We have 2 others in custody besides Reeves. His personal assistant who helped set up the shell corporations, and a junior trader who processed the fraudulent orders. But Reeves is the architect. His fingerprints are on every piece of the operation. How did he think he'd get away with it? Dr. Chen's question came out bewildered. The logs, the evidence. Eventually someone would find it. Eventually isn't the same as never. Rodriguez pulled up Reeves' communication records. He had a plan. When the system's performance degradation became too obvious to ignore, he was going to blame it on the AI's machine learning drift. Claim the system needed a complete rebuild. And in that rebuild, he'd destroy all evidence of the exploitation. Patricia finished the thought. Start fresh with a new backdoor in place. But he didn't count on the Sentinel AI failing. Sarah looked at Kofi. Didn't count on a crisis that would bring in outside scrutiny. Didn't count on someone who could see through the complexity to the simple truth underneath. The monitor showed Reeves being led into an interrogation room. Agent Rodriguez headed for the door. I need to question him before his lawyers shut him down completely. She paused, looking back at Kofi. The SEC wants to meet with you. You're a material witness. Your testimony about how you identified the systematic flaws will be critical to the prosecution. Kofi nodded, too tired to fully process what that meant. Thorne moved to stand in front of him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, the CEO's mask was completely gone. Raw emotion played across his face. You saved my company. More than that, you saved me from being framed for crimes I didn't commit. Thorne's voice was rough. Reeves used my stolen credentials for everything. Every fraudulent trade traced back to my executive access. Without your fix, without exposing the exploitation pattern, I'd be the one in handcuffs right now. That's why he was so confident. Dr. Chun realized. Reeves knew if the system stayed broken, if performance kept degrading, eventually there'd be an investigation. And all evidence would point to Thorne. He'd built the perfect scapegoat. Patricia pulled up Reeves' employment history. He's been with TechCore for 7 years. Thorne promoted him 4 times. Trusted him with core infrastructure. Her voice softened. Richard, you couldn't have known. But I should have questioned. Thorne looked at the quantum trading engine performance metrics, now running at 94% efficiency. Should have asked why systems kept getting more complex instead of more effective. Should have wondered if sophistication was just another word for obfuscation. The room fell quiet except for the soft hum of servers running at speeds they'd never achieved before. Kofi stared at the screens, watching milliseconds of trading data flow past in perfect, optimized streams. All those people who'd trusted TechCore with their retirement funds, their savings, their futures, they'd been stolen from for 18 months, tiny amounts at a time, and never even knew it. Until a beggar's son looked at the system and asked the simplest question in the world. Why is this so slow? Sarah's phone buzzed. She checked it, then looked up with wide eyes. Bloomberg just published a breaking news alert. The story's already leaked. Federal investigation into systematic fraud at TechCore. Stock is halted pending disclosure. Here it comes. Thorne moved to the window, watching news helicopters circling the building. The complete destruction of everything I built. Or the rebirth. Kofi joined him at the window. You can't rebuild on a broken foundation. But once it's cleared, once everyone knows the truth, you can build something real. With what reputation? Thorne laughed bitterly. I'm the CEO who let systematic fraud happen under my watch, who promoted the architect of the theft, who built systems so complex they could hide crimes for years. You're also the CEO who gave a dropout kid a chance to prove himself. Patricia stood, who honored $100 million promise even though it would have been easier to discredit him, who chose fixing the problem over protecting the lie. She pulled up her phone. I'm calling a press conference. You're going to tell this story before someone else spins it into something worse. Thorne looked at Kofi. What do I say? The truth. Kofi's voice was steady despite his exhaustion. That complexity can be camouflage. That credentials aren't the same as competence. That sometimes the clearest sight comes from people society taught you to ignore. The CEO nodded slowly, then turned to his team. Get me every senior executive in the main conference room in 30 minutes. We're restructuring everything. Every system Kofi identified as flawed gets rebuilt. Simple, transparent, auditable, and Dr. Chun prompted. And we're starting a scholarship program. Full ride, living expenses, mentorship, for talented kids who can't afford traditional education. Thorne met Kofi's eyes. Kids who see patterns the rest of us miss. Who understand that the best solution isn't always the most complicated one. Sarah was already taking notes. How many scholarships? Start with 100. Note 200. Thorne's voice grew stronger. Full 4-year programs. Computer science. Engineering. Mathematics. But also philosophy. Logic. Critical thinking. Everything we should have been teaching ourselves. The countdown clock that had governed the last 24 hours sat at 0. But somehow time felt like it was starting over. Like everything that came before was just prologue to what happened next. Kofi swayed slightly, his exhaustion finally catching up with him. Kwame caught his son before he could fall. You need sleep. The father's voice was thick with emotion. You've been awake for 30 hours. Can't. Kofi blinked hard, trying to focus. Have to document everything for the SEC. Have to make sure the fixes propagate correctly. Have to rest. Dr. Chun moved forward. I'll handle the documentation. Sarah will monitor the systems. You've done enough. But the other systems? Kofi gestured weakly at the screens showing the 63 systems he'd fixed. They need verification. Testing. What if something breaks? Then we'll fix it. Patricia's voice was gentle but firm. That's what engineers do. That's what you taught us to do. Look at the problem simply. Fix the foundation. Build from there. Kwame was already guiding Kofi toward a small room off the crisis center. A place with a couch that suddenly looked more inviting than anything Kofi had ever seen. But at the doorway he turned back. His voice came out small, young, revealing for the first time how scared he'd been through all of this. Did I do okay? The question hung in the air. Thorne crossed the room in 3 strides, dropped to one knee so he was eye level with the 14-year-old who'd saved his empire and exposed its corruption in the same breath. You did more than okay. The CEO's voice broke slightly. You did what none of us could do. You saw the truth through the lies. You chose integrity over expedience. You proved that genius isn't about where you're from or what schools you attended. It's about how clearly you can see what actually matters. Kofi nodded once, then let his father lead him away. The door closed behind them. The room fell into contemplative silence. Outside, news helicopters circled. Federal agents processed evidence. The financial world began reacting to news of the investigation. And somewhere in an interrogation room, Marcus Reeves was about to learn that stolen credentials only worked in systems designed to be exploitable. Dr. Chun finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. We were so proud of our complexity, our sophisticated solutions, our elegant architectures, and all of it was just, Sarah searched for the word noise, hiding the signal that mattered. Patricia checked her watch. 28 minutes until the press conference. Richard, what's your opening statement? Thorne stood, straightening his tie out of habit. His voice came out clear, certain. Today, TechCore Global Industries learned the most expensive lesson in its history. That complexity without clarity is just another word for confusion. That credentials without humility are just another form of arrogance. And that sometimes, he looked at the closed door where Kofi had disappeared. The clearest vision comes from those who haven't been taught what not to see. The quantum trading engine hummed in the background, processing billions of dollars in transactions at speeds its designers had never imagined possible. All because someone stripped away the complexity they'd mistaken for sophistication. All because a beggar's son looked at the emperor's new clothes and said the thing everyone else had been too educated to see. They were naked. The press conference was supposed to start at 3 p.m. At 2:47, Agent Rodriguez burst into the preparation room where Thorne was rehearsing his statement. Her face had gone pale, her usual professional composure cracked. "We have a problem." Patricia looked up from her notes. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where Marcus Reeves just committed suicide in federal custody." The words landed like a physical blow. The room froze. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Dr. Chun sat down heavily. Thorne's carefully practiced statement fell from his fingers. "How?" Patricia's voice came out barely above a whisper. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. He asked to use the restroom. Handed over his belt, his shoelaces, everything. We followed protocol. But he'd swallowed something before we arrested him. Some kind of delayed release poison capsule. By the time he collapsed, she shook her head. EMTs couldn't save him. The implications cascaded through the room like falling dominoes. The architect of the fraud was dead. His testimony was gone. His knowledge of how deep the corruption went, who else might be involved, what other systems might be compromised. All of it died with him in a federal bathroom. Thorne found his voice. His co-conspirators, the assistant, the traitor, are cooperating fully. Rodriguez pulled up her tablet. But they only knew their small pieces. The assistants set up shell corporations without understanding what they'd be used for. The traitor processed orders without knowing they were fraudulent. Reeves compartmentalized everything. He was the only one who saw the full picture. So we'll never know if there are other backdoors. Dr. Chen's voice carried the weight of that realization. Other systems he compromised. Other people involved. The door opened again. This time it was Agent Wilson, Rodriguez's partner, his expression grim. "We found something in Reeves' office. Hidden server. Air-gapped from the main network." He pulled up images on his phone. "It's encrypted, but preliminary analysis suggests there are files labeled with other company names. TechCore's competitors. Industrial espionage." Patricia's eyes widened. "He wasn't just stealing from your clients. He was selling your proprietary systems to everyone." Thorne sank into a chair. "That's why he built the backdoors. Not just for the trading fraud. For access. For leverage. He turned our entire infrastructure into his personal intelligence network." Sarah was already pulling up system logs, searching for any evidence of data exfiltration. If he was copying proprietary code, if he was selling our client list, our algorithms, our trade secrets. She stopped, her face going even paler. "Oh God, the utility grid optimization system. The one Kofi fixed. It's used in 47 cities across 12 countries. And if Reeves built backdoors into it," Rodriguez finished the thought, "he could have sold access to hostile foreign actors. This isn't just corporate fraud anymore. This could be infrastructure terrorism." The press conference was now 13 minutes away. Outside, reporters were assembling, cameras positioning. The world preparing to hear TechCore's official response to the federal investigation. But what they'd planned to say, what Thorne had rehearsed about systematic design flaws and the brilliant dropout who'd exposed them, suddenly felt inadequate. Because this wasn't just about redundant verification loops anymore. This was about how deep the rot actually went. Kwame appeared in the doorway, supporting Kofi, who looked slightly more alert after 20 minutes of attempted rest. The boy took one look at the faces in the room and stopped. What happened? Thorne met his eyes. Reeves is dead. Suicide. And we just found evidence he might have compromised systems beyond TechCore. Way beyond. Kofi moved to Sarah's terminal, his exhaustion forgotten. Show me. The hidden server's contents cascaded across the screen. Encrypted files with names like powergrid_Shanghai_access and traffic_management_London_override and water_treatment protocols. Hundreds of files. Thousands. 7 years of systematic infiltration and exploitation. He wasn't just stealing money. Kofi's voice was hollow. He was building an empire of access to every critical system TechCore ever designed. He could have crashed entire cities, could have caused casualties. Agent Wilson's voice was flat. Yes, we're contacting Homeland Security, NSA, international partners. This is now a national security investigation. The press conference countdown hit 10 minutes. Patricia looked at Thorne. We can't announce this. Not yet. Not until we know the full scope. But we have to say something. Thorne gestured at the assembled media outside. We can't just cancel. The speculation alone would crater our stock, destroy client confidence, then tell them part of the truth. Kofi was still studying the hidden server files, his mind visibly racing. Tell them about the redundant verification loops, about the systematic design flaws, about the trading fraud. But don't mention the espionage until we know what we're dealing with. That's lying by omission. Dr. Chun objected. It's triage. Patricia countered. If we announce that critical infrastructure worldwide might be compromised, before we even understand the scope, we could cause panic. Market crashes. Maybe worse. Or we could prevent it. Sarah pulled up a new screen. Look, Kofi's fixes didn't just improve performance. They also closed Reeves' back doors. By removing the redundant verification loops, by simplifying the system architecture, he inadvertently eliminated the complexity that Reeves was hiding his access points in. Rodriguez leaned forward. Are you saying the fixes already deployed would block the compromised access? Most of it. Kofi highlighted specific code sections. The backdoors relied on the same overcomplicated verification systems that created the trading fraud opportunity. When I stripped those out, I stripped out his hidden access points too. Not all of them, he scrolled through more files, but probably 80, maybe 90%. So Reeves knew. Dr. Chun realized. When you deployed the quantum trading engine fix, when it closed his exploitation window, he knew all his other backdoors were about to fall too. That's why he tried to wipe the evidence. And when that failed, he chose death over exposure. Thorne's voice was grim, because what he'd done, what he'd enabled, it was bigger than fraud. It was treason. The press conference was now 7 minutes away. Patricia made a decision. Richard, you go out there and deliver the statement we prepared. Design flaws, trading fraud, the brilliant kid who saved the company. All of it true, just incomplete. And while I'm doing that, Thorne looked at the federal agents. We'll be coordinating a global response. Rodriguez was already on her phone. Every system TechCore designed needs immediate security audits. Every client needs to be notified. Every government that uses your infrastructure needs to be briefed. This is going to be the largest coordinated security response in corporate history. Kofi pulled away from the terminal. I need to help. You need to rest. Kwame's voice was firm. Let them handle this part. But I know the systems. I know where Reeves would have hidden his access points. Kofi looked at Agent Rodriguez. I can help you find them faster. The agent studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but you work with our cybersecurity team. You don't go rogue. You don't take risks. Understand? Kofi nodded, then looked at Thorne. The press conference. Should I be there? No. Patricia answered before Thorne could. You're a minor, a witness, and until we understand the full scope of this, you need to be protected. Reeves is dead, but if he was working with foreign actors, with organized crime, she trailed off. You're not safe. Not yet. The weight of that settled over the room like a shroud. This had started as a story about a beggar's son fixing a broken traffic system, had escalated to exposing corporate fraud, and now had metastasized into something that could threaten national security, international infrastructure, maybe even cost lives. 3 minutes to the press conference. Thorne straightened his tie, composed his face, prepared to walk into a room full of cameras and deliver a truth that was simultaneously complete and devastatingly incomplete. He paused at the door, looked back at Kofi. When this is over, when we've secured every system, closed every backdoor, caught every conspirator, I'm still honoring our deal. The money, the scholarship program, all of it. I don't want the money anymore. Kofi's voice came out tired, sad. I just want people to be safe. Then help us make them safe. Thorne held his gaze. Help us close every hole Reeves opened. And when it's done, when the world can breathe again, we'll figure out how to rebuild from the ashes. The CEO walked out to face the cameras, to deliver a story that was true but incomplete, to begin the public narrative that would somehow have to explain how systematic incompetence had enabled systematic corruption. Behind him, Kofi turned back to the terminal, to the hidden server files that represented 7 years of theft, manipulation, and betrayal. Sarah moved to work beside him. Dr. Chun pulled up system architecture diagrams. Agent Rodriguez coordinated with federal cybersecurity teams. And in city control rooms around the world, in power grids and water treatment facilities and traffic management centers, the fixes that Kofi had deployed began their work. Closing backdoors, simplifying complexity, stripping away the camouflage that had hidden crimes inside what everyone assumed was sophisticated design. But as Kofi scrolled through file after file, seeing the scope of what Reeves had built, a terrible thought crystallized in his mind. What if Reeves hadn't been working alone? What if there were others still inside TechCore, still watching, still waiting? What if the real architect of this entire conspiracy was still free? He was about to voice that fear when alarms erupted across every monitor in the room. Someone was attempting to access the hidden server remotely, right now, trying to delete files before federal agents could fully image them. Trace it. Rodriguez barked the order. Find out where that connection is coming from. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard. The access is bouncing through multiple proxies, but the original signal, she pulled up a building schematic, is coming from inside TechCore headquarters. 4th floor, executive suites. Every eye in the room turned to stare at the ceiling. Someone above them, right now, was trying to destroy evidence. Someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. Someone who'd been Reeves' partner all along. The 4th floor of TechCore Global Industries housed only 3 occupied offices. Richard Thorne's, currently empty while he faced the press conference. Patricia Stern's, visible through security cameras showing her standing beside Thorne at the podium. And the office of Jonathan Mercer, Chief Financial Officer, who'd been with the company since its founding. The same Jonathan Mercer who'd signed off on every major system design, who'd approved Reeves' promotion 4 times, who'd defended the complexity of TechCore's architecture to skeptical board members and regulatory agencies for 7 years. Agent Rodriguez was already moving, hand on her weapon. Wilson, take a team to Mercer's office. No sirens. No warnings. I want him contained before he realizes we're coming. Kofi stared at the access logs, his mind racing backward through everything he'd observed in the last 30 hours. Mercer had been in the crisis room when Kwame first brought Kofi forward. Had been there when Thorne issued the challenge. Had disappeared during the overnight marathon, claiming urgent calls with international investors. Had reappeared just before the quantum trading engine fix, standing in the back of the room, watching everything. He knew. Kofi's voice cut through the organized chaos. Mercer knew exactly when I'd deploy the fixes. He was waiting to see if I'd succeed or fail. And when I succeeded, He activated his contingency plan. Sarah pulled up communication logs. Mercer sent encrypted messages to 17 different recipients in the 30 minutes after you fixed the quantum trading engine. Before Reeves was arrested. Before we found the hidden server. He was warning them. Dr. Chun moved closer to the screen, warning other conspirators that their access was about to be cut off, that the back doors were closing. Rodriguez's radio crackled. Agent Wilson's voice came through tense. We've reached Mercer's office. Doors locked. No response to identification. Permission to breach? Granted. The response came simultaneously from Rodriguez and Patricia Stern, who'd somehow slipped away from the press conference and was now standing in the crisis room doorway, her face carved from stone. The security monitors showed tactical agents positioning at Mercer's door, breaching tools ready. But before they could move, the door opened from inside. Jonathan Mercer stood in the doorway, hands raised, a laptop visible on the desk behind him. His expression was calm, almost serene. I'd like to invoke my right to an attorney. The agents moved in, securing him, reading Miranda rights. But Mercer's eyes never left the camera positioned above the elevator bank. He was looking directly into the lens, and through it directly at whoever was watching the security feed. Directly at Kofi. The boy felt ice slide down his spine, because Mercer was smiling. Not the defeated smile of someone caught. The satisfied smile of someone who'd already won. The laptop. Kofi pointed at the screen. He left it open. On purpose. He wants us to see something. Rodriguez zoomed the security camera feed. The laptop screen was visible, displaying what looked like a countdown timer. 16 minutes, 43 seconds. Counting down toward 0. What happens when it hits 0? Sarah's question came out barely above a whisper. Agent Wilson, who'd entered Mercer's office, leaned over the laptop carefully. His voice came through the radio strained. It's connected to something. Multiple remote servers. And there's a message displayed. He read it slowly. The foundation was always cracked. Today we just make it visible. Evacuate the building. Patricia's command was immediate. Everyone out. Now. But Rodriguez shook her head. Her eyes locked on the countdown. If this is what I think it is, evacuating won't matter. She turned to Kofi. Can you access that laptop remotely? Stop whatever he's triggered? I can try. Kofi pulled up network access protocols, searching for Mercer's laptop in the building's Wi-Fi. But if he's any good, and based on everything else he'll have safeguards. Attempts to interrupt the countdown might trigger it early. 15 minutes remained. Thorne burst back into the crisis room, the press conference abandoned. What the hell is happening? Your CFO just activated a dead man's switch. Patricia's voice was clinical, distant. We have 15 minutes to figure out what it's going to do. Dr. Chun was already pulling up system monitoring. All TechCore infrastructure worldwide is showing normal operations. No suspicious activity. No unusual access patterns. Because whatever he's planning isn't targeting TechCore. Kofi's realization came with horrifying clarity. He's targeting the clients. The cities. Everyone who uses systems we designed. The laptop screen suddenly changed. Mercer's smiling face appeared in a pre-recorded video. His voice echoed through the security feed, calm and measured. If you're watching this, then the investigation succeeded beyond what I expected. Congratulations. You found the fraud. You found the hidden server. You probably think you're heroes. He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. But you've fundamentally misunderstood what we built here. We? Sarah leaned forward. He said we. TechCore was never a technology company. Mercer continued. It was a Trojan horse. A way to embed dependency, complexity, and control into the critical infrastructure of 47 cities across 12 countries. Every system we designed had redundant loops, deliberate inefficiencies, hidden access points. Not because we were incompetent, he smiled wider, but because chaos is profitable. and control of chaos is even more profitable. 13 minutes on the countdown. Rodriguez was on the phone with multiple agencies simultaneously. NSA, Homeland Security, Interpol. But her eyes never left the screen. When your brilliant beggar's son fixed our Sentinel AI, when he stripped away the complexity we'd so carefully built, he didn't just close back doors. Mercer's expression turned almost fond. He proved our thesis. That simplicity beats complexity. That clarity beats obfuscation. That one person with true vision is worth more than 1,000 credentialed fools. For that, I'm actually grateful. Kofi felt sick. Mercer was treating this like an intellectual exercise, like lives weren't hanging in the balance. But here's what your genius didn't see. The CFO leaned forward, his eyes intense. We built fail-safes, insurance, subroutines embedded so deep in the architecture that even stripping away the redundant loops wouldn't touch them. Dormant code that activates only when specific conditions are met. Conditions like, let's say, federal investigation into systematic fraud. Patricia's face had gone white. He's gonna crash everything. Not crash. Mercer's smile turned predatory. Evolve. In 11 minutes, every tech core system worldwide will receive an update. A final gift from Marcus Reeves and myself. The systems will become what they were always meant to be. Not servants of their cities, but masters of them. The video ended. The countdown continued its inexorable march toward zero. 11 minutes, 7 seconds. 6, 5. We need to shut down every tech core system. Dr. Chun was already moving toward the master control panel. Kill power to everything. It's the only way. You can't. Kofi's voice stopped him. Those systems are managing traffic in 47 cities. Power grids, water treatment, emergency services. If we shut them all down simultaneously, people will die. Accidents, medical equipment, hospital power systems. So we let Mercer's update propagate? Sarah's voice cracked. Let him turn critical infrastructure into, what? Weapons? Agent Wilson's voice came through the radio again. We've got Mercer in custody and interrogation. He's not talking, just smiling. Won't say what the update does. Won't say how to stop it. 10 minutes remained. Thorne stood frozen, watching his empire reveal itself as something monstrous. Patricia was coordinating with city officials, emergency services, trying to prepare for catastrophe without knowing what form it would take. And Kofi stared at the countdown, his mind racing through everything he'd learned about tech core systems, every fix he'd implemented, every line of code he'd examined, every pattern he'd identified. The redundant verification loops weren't just incompetence. They were intentional, but his fixes had removed them, had simplified the systems, had made them run cleaner, faster, better. So why was Mercer smiling? What did you see that I didn't? Kofi whispered to himself, pulling up system architectures again, searching for what he'd missed, for the trap he'd walked into while thinking he was saving everyone. 8 minutes. 7. Sarah noticed Kofi's frantic searching. What are you looking for? The thing I missed. The boy's fingers flew across the keyboard. Mercer said the dormant code was embedded so deep that stripping away the loops wouldn't touch it. But that means he stopped, his blood running cold. Oh no. What? Rodriguez moved behind him. I didn't just remove the redundant loops. I optimized the entire execution path. Made the systems run faster, more efficiently. Kofi pulled up his own fixes, seeing them suddenly in a horrifying new light. What if that efficiency is what triggers the dormant code? What if I built the gun and Mercer's just pulling the trigger? Then we need to undo your fixes. Dr. Chun was already opening the deployment controls. Roll back to the old systems. Put the inefficiency back. There's no time. Sarah checked the countdown. 6 minutes. It takes at least 15 minutes to roll back a system update across that many installations. And that's if nothing goes wrong. So we're trapped. Thorne's voice was hollow. Damned if we fix it. Damned if we don't. Kofi closed his eyes, forcing his exhausted mind to think clearly. Mercer was smart, brilliant, had planned this for years, but he'd also made one critical assumption. He'd assumed that whoever discovered the fraud would react predictably, would try to fix things the conventional way, would trust the systems they were working with. But Kofi wasn't conventional. I need access to the master control system. Kofi opened his eyes. Full access. Every permission. Every override. That's insane. Dr. Chun objected. You'd have the ability to control every tech core system simultaneously. The potential for catastrophic failure is already here. Kofi cut him off. 5 minutes left and we're out of options. Either trust me or watch whatever Mercer planned happen. Thorne didn't hesitate. Give him access. Sir, the liability, one of the lawyers started, is meaningless if we're all dead. Grant him full administrative access. Now, the permissions cascaded through the system. Kofi's terminal lit up with access levels that probably shouldn't exist, control mechanisms that could reshape critical infrastructure across 12 countries. His hands hovered over the keyboard. For minutes, 30 seconds remained. What are you going to do? Sarah asked. Something Mercer wouldn't expect. Kofi began typing. He's planned for every conventional response. Shutdown, rollback, isolation. But he hasn't planned for one thing. What? Patricia leaned over his shoulder. Simplification. Kofi pulled up the core execution layer of every tech core system. Not the complicated architecture with all its protocols and safeguards and security measures. The fundamental layer underneath. The basic input-output mechanism that controlled everything else. I'm going to strip away everything. Every layer of complexity. Every piece of sophisticated code. Down to the absolute minimum needed for the systems to function. You'll destroy all our intellectual property. Dr. Chen's voice was anguished. Years of development. Billions in proprietary technology. Which is exactly what Mercer's using to hide his malware. Kofi kept typing, his fingers moving faster than Sarah had ever seen. He embedded his dormant code in the complexity. In the sophisticated layers that everyone was too impressed by to question. If I strip all of that away, down to simple input-output logic, you strip away his attack vector. Rodriguez understood. The dormant code will have nothing to hook into. It'll just fail to execute. 3 minutes remained. The changes Kofi was implementing began propagating across TechCore's global infrastructure. In Shanghai, traffic management systems suddenly simplified, running on bare-bones logic that was elegant in its directness. In London, power grid optimization became straightforward load balancing without any sophisticated prediction algorithms. In Mumbai, water treatment controls reduced to simple flow management based on immediate demand. Every system got dumber, simpler, less impressive, and in doing so became unhackable. The countdown hit 2 minutes. Mercer's dormant code began attempting to activate, reaching for the sophisticated layers it expected to find, the complex architecture it needed to propagate, the elaborate systems it was designed to exploit, and found nothing. Just simple, clear, functional logic that did exactly what it was supposed to do and nothing more. 1 minute. The malware tried to adapt to find purchase in the simplified systems. But without complexity to hide in, without sophisticated protocols to exploit, it was just noise. Garbage code that the streamlined systems simply ignored because it didn't serve any functional purpose. 30 seconds. In interrogation, Mercer's smile finally faltered. He was watching the system monitors, seeing his carefully planned attack dissolve into irrelevance. 15 seconds. Rodriguez held her breath. Thorne gripped the back of Kofi's chair. Sarah counted down silently. Dr. Chun watched his life's work reduce to its barest essence. 0. Nothing happened. The systems continued running. Traffic flowed. Power stayed on. Water kept pumping. Emergency services maintained communication. Across 47 cities in 12 countries, critical infrastructure kept functioning exactly as it should. Simply, directly, honestly, Mercer's attack had failed completely. The crisis room erupted in relieved chaos. Patricia was already on the phone with the mayor's office with international partners, confirming that systems were stable. Rodriguez coordinated with field agents to secure any remaining conspirators. Dr. Chan stared at the simplified code with an expression caught between horror and awe. But Kofi just sat at his terminal, his hands trembling with exhaustion. He'd done it. Again. But this time he'd destroyed the very thing that made TechCore valuable. All their proprietary technology. All their sophisticated algorithms. All their impressive complexity. Gone. Replaced with systems that worked but weren't worth billions. That functioned but couldn't be sold as premium technology. That served their cities but wouldn't make TechCore's investors rich. Thorne moved to stand beside him. His voice came out quiet. You just bankrupted my company. I saved 47 cities. Kofi met his eyes. Isn't that worth more? The CEO stared at him for a long moment, then started laughing. It was an exhausted, slightly hysterical sound, but genuine. Yes, it absolutely is. He addressed the room. Ladies and gentlemen, as of this moment, TechCore Global Industries is fundamentally changing its business model. We're going open source. What? Patricia stopped mid-phone call. All our systems, all our code, open source, free. Thorne's voice grew stronger. If Kofi can strip away our complexity this easily, so can our competitors. We have no proprietary advantage anymore. But what we do have, he gestured at the stable systems running across the monitors, is proof that simple works. That clear beats complicated. That functional beats impressive. And that's what we're going to sell? Dr. Chen's voice carried disbelief. That's what we're going to teach. Thorne pulled out his phone. Richard, it's Thorne. I need you to draft a press release. TechCore is releasing all proprietary code to the public domain. Immediately, we're establishing an open source foundation to maintain and improve critical infrastructure systems worldwide. And we're funding it with, he looked at Kofi, 200 full scholarships for unconventional talent. Kids who see through complexity to simple truth. Outside, sirens were finally arriving. Federal vehicles. Emergency response. Media who'd gotten wind that something much bigger than a press conference was happening. The story that would break in the next few hours wouldn't just be about corporate fraud. It would be about infrastructure terrorism, dormant malware, and the complete restructuring of how critical systems were designed and protected. But at the center of it all would be one fact that no one could deny. A 14-year-old dropout had saved 47 cities by making everything simpler. Agent Rodriguez approached Kofi as medical personnel checked him for signs of extreme exhaustion. The boy's eyes could barely focus. You'll need to give testimony. Lots of it. This investigation is going to take years. Okay. Kofi's voice was slurred with fatigue. But first I need to sleep. For like a week. First you need this. Thorne placed a folded piece of paper in Kofi's hand. It was a certified check. $100 million. Payable to Kofi Mensah. The boy stared at it. This is real. It's real. Plus the scholarship in your name. Plus a lifetime position as TechCore's Chief Simplification Officer. If you want it when you're old enough. Plus, Thorne's voice softened. My genuine apology. For every assumption I made. Every prejudice I held. Every moment I let credentials matter more than capability. Kofi looked up at him. You really thought we were nothing? I did. Thorne nodded. And I was completely, catastrophically wrong. He raised his voice to address the entire room. We all were. We built a religion around complexity, around sophistication, around the belief that if we made things complicated enough, we could convince everyone, including ourselves, that we were indispensable. He gestured at the simplified systems still running perfectly. But your son proved what should have been obvious. that the best solution is usually the clearest one. Kwame finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. We should go home. My son needs rest. You don't have a home. Patricia stepped forward gently. You told me you've been moving between shelters. So, she pulled out a key card. TechCore is putting you up at the Meridian Hotel. Executive Suite. For as long as you need it. Plus, she handed Kwame a second piece of paper, a consultant contract. We need someone who understands the view from the streets, who can tell us when we're overcomplicating things again. Because we will. Dr. Chun added quietly. It's in our nature. We're trained to show our intelligence through complexity. Someone needs to keep telling us to simplify. That's a job? Kofi asked. It is now. Thorne smiled. Chief of Clarity. Reports directly to the CEO. Vetoes any design that can't be explained to a 14-year-old. Kwame looked at his son. Kofi looked back. And in that moment, the weight of everything that had happened settled over them. The humiliation they'd endured. The impossible challenge. The sleepless marathon. The discovery of fraud and terrorism and systemic rot. The desperate race to save cities from weaponized complexity. And now, somehow, they were being offered not just money but purpose. Not just survival but significance. Kofi held out his hand to Thorne. But this time when they shook, it wasn't a deal made under duress. It was a partnership between people who'd learned the same lesson from opposite sides. That credentials without character are meaningless. That complexity without clarity is chaos. That sometimes the clearest voice comes from those who've never been taught what not to say. The federal agents began escorting Mercer out of the building. The former CFO's face was no longer serene. He'd gambled everything on the assumption that people would be too intimidated by complexity to strip it away. That they'd respect sophistication more than they valued simplicity. He'd lost that bet to a beggar's son who'd learned systems from the streets. As Kofi and Kwame finally left the crisis room, heading toward rest and a future they couldn't quite believe was real, Sarah turned to Dr. Chun. You know what the craziest part is? What? We've been teaching engineering students for decades that elegant solutions are the goal. That simplicity is the mark of true understanding. But we never actually practiced it. We rewarded complexity. We promoted sophistication. We mistook confusion for depth. So what do we do now? Dr. Chun looked at the stripped-down systems running with brutal efficiency. We relearn everything. Sarah smiled slightly. And we let street kids teach us. Outside, dawn was breaking over the city. 47 cities worldwide woke up to traffic systems that flowed smoothly, power grids that balanced efficiently, water treatment that functioned reliably. They'd never know how close they'd come to catastrophic failure. Never understand that their survival had depended on one exhausted teenager choosing clarity over complexity. But in boardrooms and engineering schools and government agencies around the world, the message was spreading. The story of TechCore's near collapse and miraculous restructuring. The tale of systematic fraud hidden in impressive architecture. The legend of the beggar's son who'd stripped away sophistication to reveal simple truth. And embedded in that story was a question that would reshape how an entire generation thought about technology, education, and worth. What else have we overcomplicated because we were too educated to see the simple answer? In a hotel suite overlooking the city he'd just saved, Kofi finally surrendered to sleep. But even in his dreams, he was still solving problems. Still stripping away unnecessary complexity. Still asking the question that no one else had thought to ask. Why does it have to be so hard? Sometimes the most revolutionary insight is the simplest one. And sometimes the clearest vision comes from those who've never been taught what not to see. 3 months later, the first class of TechCore's Unconventional Genius Scholarship Program began their studies. 200 students from 40 countries, none with traditional credentials, all with extraordinary ability to see patterns others missed. They called themselves the Clarity Core, and they were about to change everything.